From the JAMA Network, this is JAMA Author Interviews. Conversations with authors exploring the latest clinical research, reviews, and opinion featured in JAMA.
I'm Dr. Gregory Curfman, the executive editor of JAMA. And in this JAMA author interview, I'll be speaking with Dr. Paul Cinciripini. He is director of the Tobacco Research and Treatment Program at MD Anderson Cancer Center, Department of Behavioral Science. He's the lead investigator of a clinical trial now posted on the JAMA website titled Smoking Cessation After Initial Treatment Failure with Varenicline or Nicotine Replacement. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Cinciripini.
It's my pleasure.
Now, I wonder if we could begin by asking you to tell our listeners why you undertook this study, what was the important clinical question that you were addressing, and why you decided to undertake the study at this particular time.
Well, for smoking cessation, we know that most people who make a smoking cessation attempt do not succeed, particularly initially. Data suggests that it takes multiple attempts for people to actually succeed, somewhere in the range of 3 to 19. It's an average of about 6 or 9 is what often gets quoted in the literature. And we also know that very often less than a third of individuals who do undertake a smoking cessation attempt do not receive an evidence-based treatment, particularly pharmacological and counseling combined. So what we really didn't have a very good idea about is what to do when individuals fail at their initial attempt, or should I say the medication people are using doesn't work for them on the first time that they're trying to quit. And we undertook this study in order to answer the question of what do you do after someone has made an initial attempt and has been unsuccessful in being able to quit, even though they, of course, made an attempt and tried. And in this study, what we attempted to answer was if we started with our very best treatments we know right now, and that is the combination of the nicotine patch and a episodic form of nicotine replacement, in this case the lozenge, or Varenicline. Those were our two best performing treatments at this time. If we started with those, then what should you do if individuals fail on those two treatments? And we designed a study to try to answer that question.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I wonder if we could turn now to the main findings of your clinical trial, and if you could give our listeners a summary of what you think the most important take-home messages are from your study.
Yes, we started off with nearly 500 individuals, 491 who were initially randomized into these two groups of combined nicotine replacement and Varenicline. And at the end of 6 weeks, people who were unable to quit were re-randomized into 3 conditions that we refer to as switching, continuing, or increasing the dose. So in the case of switching, an individual would get the medication that they initially did not receive. In the case of continuing, they would, of course, continuing on that same dose of medication. And in the case of increasing dose, people in the Varenicline group who were receiving the standard dose of 2 milligrams per day were now receiving 3 milligrams per day if the attempt was unsuccessful. In the combined nicotine replacement, instead of the increased dose was to wear an additional patch. So individuals started out wearing a 21 milligram patch and using a 2 milligram lozenge ad lib. And then in the increased dose condition, they were instructed to wear 2 21 milligram patches and continue the lozenge as well. So a higher dose of nicotine replacement. And what we found was among the non-abstainers in the combined nicotine replacement group, increasing the dose of the combined nicotine replacement or switching to Varenicline resulted in an abstinence rate of 14%, while those who continued on the combined nicotine replacement resulted in an abstinence rate of 8%. So it was less effective for them to continue. We used a Bayesian approach, which I can talk a little bit more about later, to understand our results. And that was an absolute risk difference of 6%, which gave us a posterior probability of 99% that either switching to varenicline or increasing the dose was better than continuation. This was in the combined nicotine replacement group. On the other hand, among those individuals who did not abstain when given the standard dose of varenicline, increasing the dose showed an abstinence rate of 20%, while switching to the combined nicotine replacement, no one abstained. So it was 0%. And staying on the normal dose of varenicline for another 6 weeks yielded 3%. So again, that was an absolute risk difference between continuing and switching of a minus 3%. So you actually did worse. Continuing was worse than switching. But in the case of increasing the dose, that resulted in an 18% increase in abstinence rate at the end of treatment over just continuing. Continuing was really the control here because that's what clinicians might do. Well, you didn't succeed, let's just leave you on that medication for a longer period of time. Whereas switching to a new medication or increasing the dose, those are the options that we were trying to test. And when you looked at we also had a secondary outcome of continuous abstinence. The first primary outcome was 7-day point prevalence. It really turns out that the story is that increasing the dose of either medication turns out to be the best strategy if you individual initially is unsuccessful on the standard dose.
Great. I wonder if you could tell us from your perspective as the investigator, were there any surprises among these results based on what you were expecting when you were planning the study?
Yeah, so at the time that we started this study, the literature suggested that the initial quit rates between the two conditions, combined nicotine replacement varenicline, would be about the same, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%, because there really wasn't at that time a head-to-head comparison between these two treatments. What we found is the initial results is indeed varenicline was better at 36% versus 22%, but both of those results were a little lower than what we had initially predicted or expected. If you looked at the abstainers, those who initially abstained and you followed them to the end of the treatment at 12 weeks, a higher proportion of those on combined nicotine replacement, about 78%, continued to be abstinence, and a slightly lower proportion of those on varenicline, 72%, continued to be abstinent. And what that actually means, though, is because there were more people who were abstinent initially on varenicline, because the quit rates were higher, there was there were more quitters, if you will, in the varenicline group at the end of treatment, even though the proportion was a little lower than in the combined treatment. And I guess the message there is that individuals who are successful in their cessation attempt initially, a very large proportion of them, early quitters, are going to remain abstinent. So it turns out that our study really makes that contribution of, again, what to do when people fail. If they succeed initially, they're going to have a really good chance of staying abstinent to the end of treatment. But if they fail, you need to do something different.
Now, my final question relates to the overall clinical impact of the conclusions from your study. And I wonder if you could tell us how you believe your study will affect smoking cessation in clinical practice and public health more generally.
Sure. Up to this point, there really hasn't been a lot of guidance, I think, for clinicians to know what should you do when a treatment doesn't work the first time that you offer that to a smoker. And unlike other areas of medicine, like hypertension or hypercholesterolemia, there aren't a lot of options for smoking cessation pharmacotherapies. There are very few. So we have to be creative. We have to think about these combination treatments, changing the dose, things, if you will, that are off-label in many respects, because the initial trials are usually done for one treatment for 12 weeks, and that's the end of that. So the clinical take-home message is that we can do something different. In this case, increasing the dose will be a very good option for individuals who the treatment doesn't work the first time they try it. We can increase the dose, and that would have a good impact in increasing the overall cessation rates. The overall cessation rates, if you look at the entire time that individuals were on medication, we were able to increase the overall cessation rates over what you would have seen in a clinical trial had you just left everybody on the same medication. And that was really I think the novel contribution of the study is to see if you manipulate something early, you can get a better long-term result for everyone than if you just let things ride for, let's say, a full 12-week treatment course of medication.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Cinciripini, for giving us your perspective on this very interesting research on smoking cessation.
Thank you so much for having me.
This JAMA author interview was produced by Daniel Morrow. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, please visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com. I'm Dr. Gregory Curfman, and thanks for listening.